Hare Krishna, part 4, and I hope you're keeping up with the three modes of material nature. And here we are in the 16th verse, in which Krishna is explaining to us what the results of different activities are. If you remember in the previous part, part 3, I ended up by emphasizing this point, which you'll keep hearing me emphasize through this chapter. The choices you make determines the modes that you're in. The modes that you make determines what type of life you live, what type of death you have, and what type of future you have in your next life. Where do we want to go? So, as they say, start with the end in mind. And for you're all here, spiritual seekers, those who are looking for something better than what you have right now. So Krishna then advises in the following way. He says, Karmana sukritasyahu satvikam nirmalam palam rajasastu palam dukam agyanam tamasapalam. The result of pious action, meaning following the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, following the regulated practices of yoga, the results of pious action is pure and is said to be in the mode of goodness. But action done in the mode of passion results in misery, and action performed in the mode of ignorance results in foolishness. So piety means mode of goodness. Foolish activity, as Krishna here talks about, that which has no real meaningful purpose, results in ignorance, and the result of fruitive activity, wanting to enjoy this world, results in passion. Similarly, when we act in these different ways, we will draw the influence of that mode increasingly upon us, which then further inflames that very same type of conduct that we began. In other words, if I act in a foolish way, the mode of ignorance becomes prevalent in my life. The prevalence of the mode of ignorance just increases my foolishness. My foolishness increases the mode of ignorance, and you get the picture. It just increases more and more. You turn to the next page, and 17. Krishna says, from the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. You've heard this before. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from a mode of ignorance develops foolishness, madness, and delusion. Real knowledge comes from mode of goodness. So if we're practicing and cultivating acts of goodness, knowledge, the gates that lead us to self-realization, just open one after another. That's real knowledge. I'm not talking about knowledge about building computers, or knowledge about going to the moon, or knowledge about diving to the bottom of the ocean. Not this type of knowledge. Real knowledge. And Krishna had defined real knowledge before and told us that aside from all of those things, all these other types of acquisition of information is actually ignorance. So from goodness, that type of knowledge develops. And what happens in a passionate life? Greed. One just becomes greedy. More and more and more. Is that something that influences us? And from the mode of ignorance, foolishness, madness, illusion. Again, Krishna repeats the direction or the tendency that these modes guide us to. Goodness means we go this way. Passion means we stay where we are. Ignorance means we go down. Now in the 19th verse, Krishna says, when one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. So Krishna says, you've got to have this vision that when you're living in this world, that there's only these three modes. This is what's going on. There is nothing new. We think that we've progressed in civilization. We have not. Our civilization is bound by ignorance and passion, with practically zero goodness. It's been very similar combination of the same modes of nature, hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years. Go back as far as you want, go ahead as far as you want. It's always the same. There's nothing else but that in this world. And this idea that we're headed somewhere is complete illusion. We're just going from one prison cell to another prison cell to another prison cell. But if you're here, you're not getting out of the prison. Okay. So, but we should also know that there's actually someone who set this system in place to facilitate our illusion that we can actually be separate from the Supreme. But if we recognize that there is a Supreme, and that Supreme is transcendental, then we know, now this is the direction that I need to go. If I want to get out of this world, if I want to become liberated, then I go to the way, or to the path that leads to the liberator, to that Supreme Being who has actually created all of this. Because only He is the one who's unaffected by what's going on here. He made this system in order to let us enjoy in these foolish ways, either through knowledge, either through greed and a passionate life, or just meaningless foolishness. Here Krishna talks about becoming transcendental or going beyond the modes. And now I'm going to finish with this. When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Now, very interesting. Krishna's talking about becoming transcendental, and he highlights that these modes of nature are very specifically connected to this body, which means this gross physical body, and the mind and intelligence, which we've spoken about before. How are we able to transcend? When we are able to transcend? And Krishna explains that that transcendence can happen even while we're in this world. That you can be in this world and be unaffected by this world. And I'll close with an example. I mentioned this concept of prison several times, that we are bound in a prison. But the warden, when he comes into the prison and he visits the prisoners, he's in the prison, but he's not bound by them. He's able to go in and out at will, but not the prisoners. Similarly, when we're liberated from the influence of these modes, then even though we may be in the world, but we're unbound by them. And that's called being liberated. Liberated even in this life. And that's something that we want to attain. And how to attain that, and what the symptoms of a liberated person are, that's going to be the conclusion of our chapter 14. And that is happening, guess when? In the next last session. Hare Krishna.